Just so you all know, we are streaming starting at 10 o'clock. So we have the live stream going now.
Good morning. Welcome to this meeting of Government Oversight. I have a bunch of committee rules and procedures that I'd like to go over before we introduce committee members. We are, as a note, live streaming on YouTube and the World Wide Web. And so make sure that all committee members, if you do have your computers open, please mute when you're not speaking. We are starting in the Appropriations Committee room in person not only to have a quorum for the meeting, but also to hopefully take a few votes, and then we'll take a short break for folks to scatter throughout the building, and then we'll reconvene. And then once all members are settled and online, we'll reconvene that meeting at that time. Director Danielle Fox is joining us via Zoom from her office. All of our discussions today will be through this video and online platform. The presiding chair, myself and Representative Mastracchio, will recognize members to participate. If you'd like to speak while you're in the room, you can signal to us. If you're digitally coming to us through Zoom, you can raise your hand virtually. Materials have been distributed electronically to committee members before this meeting and have been posted to the OPEGA website. And if you are in need of those materials to follow along from home, make sure that you find today's meeting materials on the GOC meetings page. If you scroll down on that page, you will find all the materials for today's meeting. When a vote is called today, it will be taken only by those that are physically present here in the committee room, not at home. And as we're seeing right now on the page, Danielle just showed us sort of where to find some of those meeting materials if you're having trouble. We are also following all of the Legislative Council's COVID-19 prevention policies, including face coverings and social distancing. And for a member who does not register a vote in person in committee today may do so up to noon on the second business day after the time of the committee vote. With that, we're going to start with committee introductions. I'm Justin Schnedt. I represent Senate District 31, which includes the wonderful communities of Saco, Old Orchard Beach, Hollis, Leamington, and Buxton.
Good morning, I'm Anne Marie Mastracchio. I represent House District 18, which is part of the city of Sanford.
Hi, I'm Representative Teresa Peirce. I represent House District 44, which is the majority of Falmouth.
Good morning. My name is Amy Arada, and I represent District 65, which includes New Gloucester and part of Poland.
Good morning, I'm Kathleen Dillingham. I represent House District 72, which is the towns of Oxford, Otisfield, and Mechanic Falls.
Good morning, I'm Sowen Millet. I represent House District 71, including the towns of Sweden, Norway, Waterford, and West Paris.
And good morning, I'm Linda Sanborn. I represent Senate District 30, which is all of Gorham, most of Scarborough, and Buxton.
Senator Libby, would you like to introduce yourself?
Good morning, I'm Nate Libby. I proudly represent all of the people of Lewiston in the Maine Senate, and apologies for not being able to join you in person today.
No problem, Senator Libby, and I don't see any other legislators on Zoom. Going to our summary, any comments, concerns, or questions regarding the summary minutes from our November 9th meeting? Looking around the room, looking on Zoom. Okay, we'll move forward. So without objection, we're going to take a number of items out of order, again, to try to address the in-person conversations versus when we're going to split up and go to our separate committee spaces. So we're going to start with OPEGA's report on the business equipment and tax reimbursement, or BETTER, and the business equipment tax exemption program known as BETTY, and continuing our work session from our March 13th meeting. Danielle, did you want to kick things off?
Sure.
Item number 10, sorry. Yep.
Yeah, so that's behind tab 10 of your notebooks or your packet if you're joining us from home. I think Etta sent you a hard copy packet. You have had a presentation and a public comment, and you started work sessions on the BETTER and BETTY evaluation. You know, you have several options. You can make your own recommendations. By law, these reports are required to go to the taxation committee. So at a minimum, while we're still in the cohort of the 129th GOC, whether you make any recommendations or not, you should make a motion to move the report forward to the taxation committee, which is a requirement for our tax expenditure evaluation reports. So what that entails is generally saying, we've reviewed the report, we find it credible and objective, and we're sending it on for review by the taxation committee. Obviously, you could offer other recommendations with regard to what you want them to look at, suggestions for legislation, findings that you think are particularly useful, anything like that. But at a minimum, because we're ending this committee and going to the next one, the law does require that there be a vote on sending it forward to the taxation committee.
Okay. Thank you, Danielle. Representative Mastracchio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to just start things off and make that motion that pursuant to Title 3, Section 999, subsection 3, which requires the GOC to assess this report's objectivity and credibility and submit it to the Taxation Committee for review and consideration. I move that we vote to endorse OPEGA's evaluation of BETTER and BETTY as credible and objective and submit it to the Joint Standing Committee on Taxation.
So we have a motion from Representative Mastracchio to endorse the report and send it to the taxation committee. Do we have a second? Second from Representative Arata. Any discussion on the motion or any comments, concerns, or questions? Anybody on Zoom? Okay. And with that, we're going to take a vote in person. All those in favor? All those opposed? It passes unanimously. The next item, which is, this is in your booklets, it's tab or section 11. This is regarding the OPEGA report on the main capital investment credit. And again, we're continuing our work session on that report. Danielle?
Yeah, I don't think you had quite as many discussions on the MCIC report back in March, but it is the same sort of situation that we find ourselves in now, where we are meeting sort of on the cusp of a new legislature coming in. So by law, those votes are required in order for this report to move on to the taxation committee, and we want to sort of follow that formality. So it's the same deal as with the other report that you just voted on. Again, happy to have any discussions that you want, but at a minimum, that would be required today.
Okay, so, all right, Representative Mastracchio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Pursuant to Title III, Section 999, subsection 3, which requires the GOC to assess this report's objectivity and credibility and submit it to the Taxation Committee for review and consideration, I move that we vote to endorse OPEGA's evaluation of the main capital investment credit as credible and objective and submit it to the Joint Standing Committee on Taxation.
Okay, so we have a motion from Representative Mastracchio to endorse the OPEGA report and send it to the Policy Committee of Jurisdiction, the Taxation Committee. Do we have a second? Second from Senator Sanborn. Discussion, questions, comments, concerns regarding the motion? Looking around the room. Representative Arata.
Thank you. I just want to make sure that our endorsement of this report is not saying that we necessarily agree with it 100%, but we are willing to move it forward for further study.
Absolutely.
Okay.
And Danielle can pop in, but just for my 2 cents, what we've done historically on this committee is basically accept the report from OPEGA and send it to the policy committee for
Right.
making any policy judgments or discussions.
Right.
From there.
They've completed the task which they were assigned to do.
Correct. Yeah.
Okay. Thank you.
Anything else that I missed on that, Danielle?
No, that's exactly right.
Okay. That's a great question, Representative Arata. Any other questions, comments, or concerns about the motion? Okay, anybody online? Okay, with that, we're going to take a vote in person. All those in favor? All those opposed? Okay, that motion passes unanimously, and it looks like we're having low disk space in the committee. So just wanted to flag that for IT. The final item that we have to discuss in this room has to do with a new proposal from Danielle. Danielle, did you want to kick things off? And this is this is in tab 8 of your books. And this is regarding draft legislation regarding work paper confidentiality for OPEGA. Danielle.
Sure. So this is something that I'm putting forward as the director of the office and as someone who is required to direct the evaluations that you tell us to do. Now, I don't have the authority to submit legislation myself. That would be something that the GOC would have to consider, and this would be introduced as legislation under your authority to do so. And then it would be a bill in the process of the 130th legislature like any other bill. So it would be referenced, have a public hearing and a work session, those sorts of things. So I just wanted to sort of lay that out there. It does address a few issues with regard to the clarity in the law governing confidentiality. And I wanted to explain the rationale for putting this forward, and then I can talk more in detail about the proposal itself. But as you know, when you direct the Government Oversight Committee to conduct evaluations, we have this, big responsibility of maintaining confidentiality. That is because we often look at records that are confidential otherwise by law. We have the ability and the authority when we're doing an investigation to look at privileged information. We also sometimes receive information from people who are pointing out something that may be of concern within an agency that they work for. We don't use the term whistleblower, but to save you a long explanation, it also protects that information so that people will feel that they can come and talk to us and that they know that we will maintain confidentiality under all circumstances. So when you send us out to do an evaluation, we have that responsibility to protect confidential information, but also access it in the course of our evaluation. So the law anticipates that. However, we have found that there are some potential areas where the law could be clarified. And one in particular is if an entity outside, so a member of the public or the press or someone else, were to do a records request of an agency that we were evaluating, there isn't a clear provision in law that references the Freedom of Access Act request provision. Now, if the records were in my hand and someone did a Freedom of Access request, statute is very clear that those are confidential records. They are not subject to a Freedom of Access request. And I'm going to share my screen and show you the current statute as it applies to what are called OPEGA working papers when they're in my possession or the office's possession.
And Danielle, we're just going to hit pause there for a second. I'm just
Sure.
flagging again for IT. There's something on the screen that indicates low disk space. We just have to click close and then we'll be able to see your screen, Danielle, inside this room.
Okay.
We're just having some technical glitches, but we'll get there. Still there. Yeah. Okay, just 1 second, Danielle.
Sure.
At least we're getting helpful reminders about our disk space at the State House. Oh, okay, perfect. All right, I think, yep, we're good to go, Danielle. Thank you.
Okay. So what I'm showing you here is, if you can look on this page, is everyone seeing the screen?
Yes.
Okay, so subsection 3, this governs the confidentiality of OPEGA work papers when they're in the possession of the director or the office. And you will see that it refers to that these are exempt from disclosure pursuant to the provisions of Title I, Chapter 13, which is the Freedom of Access Act. So that makes that really clear. If you look at the document that I'm proposing you consider for potential legislation, the existing law, when work papers, so these same exact documents, are in the hands of the agency that's being evaluated, there is no specific cross-reference in that regard. We have run into this circumstance, and there is case law and interpretation of confidentiality of records when they're in one agency's hand or another. So we've been able to respond to those and maintain confidentiality, but it would be much easier for an agency who receives a Freedom of Access request regarding OPEGA work papers. So if they're an evaluated entity and we're communicating with them about their interactions with a vendor, and some external entity wants access to those, maybe a competing vendor or something else, the agency that we're evaluating could say, the law tells us we're not allowed to give these to you because they are working papers related to an OPEGA investigation. So they have that ability to reject them now, but there isn't a statutory reference for them to refer to in terms of when they respond to that Freedom of Access request. So that's one of the reasons that we're proposing this clarification of how OPEGA work papers would be handled when they are in the hands of another person. The other is the general idea of making sure that when we do have people that come to us, maybe that work for an agency that is subject to an investigation, or there are concerns about that, those records as well would be protected, so that we would maintain that level of trust when people want to come and speak to OPEGA, that there is not a sort of a loophole for those to be put into someone else's hands and their sort of status as a whistleblower, again, not the term we use, but that they would not be exposed. And then the third is between evaluated entities. So if you think about the example again of an agency and maybe a vendor that they're in business with, we want to maybe be looking at the activities of that vendor as well as the activities of that agency. We don't necessarily want them communicating with each other as a matter of sort of our general evaluation practice and protecting investigative methods, we want to make sure that if we're showing them something, they're not going back to the agency that contracted them and say, what should we say to OPEGA about this? So that is another example of why this clarity would be required. So working papers would be exempt from freedom of access requests, which they already are. This would just be providing the agencies that would be responding to the request a statutory reference within the OPEGA statute. And then it would clarify that even between evaluated entities, like a vendor or a state agency or two state agencies, in order to preserve our evaluation practice methods and investigative methods, they wouldn't be able to share documents between each other. Now, that is not a hard and fast rule. If you will look in the section that is being amended, the director of the agency always has the discretion to allow for those documents to be disclosed. For example, if there is some sort of glitch in a system, or if there is some error that, you know, it would be useful for them to understand. On most occasions, these working papers can be shared between, say, a vendor and the evaluated entity or two agencies. In most cases, that's okay. And oftentimes those working papers are submitted to both entities at the same time. There is always that discretion, but this does provide that protection in the case when we don't necessarily want a vendor and an agency to be communicating with each other as part of our investigation. We want to have their answers independently. It allows for us to have that clarity in statute to do that. And that really has been our practice. And it has not been a concern in terms of entities sharing information back and forth. As far as we know, they often do ask us and they apparently abide by that. So it has not been a concern, but it has highlighted that the statute is not necessarily clear in that regard. And this would provide that clarity. So those are the sort of rationales for this. And this would simply be the GOC using its authority to introduce this for consideration. So there would obviously be a whole process that this would have to go through if it went to the legislature, and there would be the opportunity for public comment. And of course, where it deals with confidentiality provisions, the Judiciary Committee would do its standard review of any exceptions to the public records law. So it would be subjected to that scrutiny as well.
So Danielle, just to, on a 30,000-foot view, as I understand the rationale here, it's both to protect really the integrity of OPEGA investigations, but also continue whistleblower protections, essentially, if I'm trying to simplify it.
Correct, and also to give agencies a statutory reference that would make it easier for them to say that these things are not subject to FOA, which is already anticipated in the law. It just provides them a specific statutory reference to say, on these grounds, I cannot give you these records because they are opaque work paper. So it's those three things.
Okay. Questions for Danielle about what is being proposed from the office? Oh, Representative Mastracchio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just in light of trying to move things along. So, I mean, it doesn't seem that there's a lot of discussion. So I'll move pursuant to Title III, Section 1001, subsection 2, which authorizes this committee to report out legislation. I move that the following amendment governing the confidentiality of OPEGA work papers be submitted for introduction to the first regular session of the 130th legislature.
We have a motion from Representative Mastracchio to form this legislation to the 130th legislature. Do we have a second? Second from Representative Peirce. Questions, discussions, comments, concerns regarding the motion at hand? I'm looking both in the, yep, Representative Dillingham.
Thank you. At this time, I'm probably not going to support the motion. I'd want a little more time to think about this. So.
Okay. Do other people would like more? So I'm seeing a head nod from Representative Roder. Is there particular information, representatives, that would be helpful that Danielle could get the committee, not necessarily just today, but moving forward to help make it a decision?
Right at this moment, I can't think of anything that I would need from her, but I could reach out if I find that I need just something for clarification to feel better about this.
Okay. Representative Peirce.
So I just want to clarify what happens when it comes out of here. This is sort of my first moment with this type of vote. So we would vote to send it forward to legislation, but then that would hit the regular process. So someone's going to be a sponsor and carry this legislation, and it'll go through committee, and it will also go through the FOA judicial review. So it'd have two other bites at the apple for public comment and consideration. Is that accurate?
Correct. Representative Mastraki, did you want to comment on that too?
Having done that with a few other pieces, it actually comes out of this committee. So whoever the chairs are would probably present it to the committee of jurisdiction. And then at that point, it would be just like any other bill. It would have a public hearing, it would have work sessions, it would have everything. So it's just that it's like somebody putting a bill forward. It's no different. It's just a particular subject that it is. So we were just in light of just trying to move things along so that it could be in the hopper for the beginning of the 130th. I think absent the pandemic, we would have worked this out and had it all ready to go probably, and it would have still been sitting there waiting for the 130th. It was never going to be presented to the 129th. So it's just trying to get this particular housekeeping thing that we've been discussing. Literally, I think we've been discussing it for 18 months to try to get it going. That's all in terms of an issue. In work papers that came out when we were doing the, I think it was the DHHS, there were papers that I think there was an attempt to kind of circumvent the working papers confidentiality and to find out, like, so we wanted emails between entities that would then have been a problem with some of those confidentiality issues of what people were saying and doing. So it just made it just took a lot more work to try to keep that information confidential that should have been confidential. And I don't know, Danielle, maybe you can explain it a little bit more completely, but it just clarifies what we think the statute says already.
Correct, and the intent, correct.
Yeah. If members don't feel comfortable voting on it today, I would be more inclined to wait then. I think for some members, this is the first time they're seeing this. And so I would be more inclined to table, get some necessary information for every member to feel comfortable with this before moving forward. So I would move to table. Do we have a second? Okay. Can you, yep, remove, and I'll remove my motion, Representative Peirce.
Sorry, you're moving quicker than I thought. So that would then mean that, I mean, I'm looking around the horseshoe where lots of people are termed or have decided not to run, or, so we're gonna have a decent amount of people new to this committee. So would that just start this whole process over with this?
Yeah, I don't think it's necessarily starting it all over. I think it's just then briefing the new 130th. I mean, much like and we're going to have a conversation around the MCIS report and how we're drafting a letter to the next GOC. We could even decide to send a letter or just have Danielle present again this clarification in law that we're proposing. So I don't think it necessarily is going to hold up the process necessarily by waiting and making sure everyone feels comfortable with that. So,
thank you.
Yep. Any other questions before I make my tabling motion? Any other concerns? And anything that Danielle, it would be helpful for Danielle to get you. Obviously the makeup is probably going to be different, but I think it's also important to make sure everyone feels comfortable with the information. Senator Libby.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This is our last meeting before December 2nd, correct?
Correct.
Could we ask Danielle to prepare a one-page letter describing this matter for the next GOC?
Yep. Any objections to a letter just outlining the process? Okay. Danielle, is that okay for you? Can you draft
Absolutely. So something that explains a little bit more of the rationale that was presented to this committee and sure.
And sorry, Mr. Chair, and noting that we had this discussion about committee members wanting additional time to consider the matter, and that we're asking the next GOC to take it up.
Sure.
Perfect. Thank you, Senator Libby. Did you get that, Danielle?
Yes.
Okay. Any other final comments, concerns, or questions on this? I move to table. Do we have a second? We have a second from Representative Dillingham. All those in favor? It's unanimous. It is tabled. And then Danielle's going to be working on the letter. So with that, we're going to take a 5-minute recess to go to our other committee rooms. It's 10:30 now, so we'll reconvene at 10:35.
I'm not sure who's still listening, but I think someone should wish happy birthday to Representative Dillingham.
Thank you, Danielle.
Senator Chinette,
Yes, Senator Libby.
I got a message from a representative who's trying to view the live feed, and they report that the live feed is not working.
From YouTube?
Correct. Well, I'll clarify, actually.
Okay, thank you, Senator Libby. Definitely clarify, and we can check in with IT for sure. And Senator and Representative O'Neill has joined us. We're just taking a quick recess as everyone goes to their other committee rooms, and then we'll be back momentarily. Senator Libby, I'm getting from IT that the YouTube link appears fine. So I don't know if they want to refresh their link or if the link may have been from the previous meeting versus the current one.
I just gave it a test and I was able to see us on YouTube. That's
Yep, it looks
helpful.
like we're all set now. We just checked in
Okay.
with the representative. Yep. And we are back to this meeting of government oversight. It looks like everyone has found their committee rooms and has logged in online. So we will continue with going a little bit out of order. We're going to be taking up item number 9 under unfinished business, which is the draft memo from the 129th GOC to the 130th GOC regarding our concerns about the Maine Commission on Indigent Legal Services as outlined in the recent OPEGA report. And everyone should have that under tab 9 of their booklets to see that letter, and it was sent to everyone as well. Danielle, did you want to say anything about that?
Sure, I'm actually sharing my screen now, so if people that are watching remotely or don't have materials in front of them where they can find that, here is the GOC meeting agenda and materials for today's meeting. And here is a copy of the draft memo. I'll maybe make that a little bit bigger. So, and then I'll just talk to you a little bit about that to let you know what's contained within it. I think you gave me direction after the presentation of our partial evaluation of the Maine Commission on Indigent Legal Services at our last meeting on November 9th, I guess that was, that there was concern about some of the issues that were raised in that report that several members said we didn't want to lose sight of, and we wanted to sort of impart on the next committee of the 130th legislature that there were things that should be attended to. And so I tried to capture that you found that some of the elements of the report regarding oversight and their financial procedures were concerning, and that although it's within their existing authority to make those changes, it doesn't require a statutory change, that you felt that that it may be necessary to use the authority of legislation to compel them to make certain improvements and maybe make them by a date certain. So I've listed the concerns with regard to the oversight structure, and then some ways in which the commission could improve their financial procedures. Those are the bulleted items on the second page of the memo. And then again, recommending that if necessary, legislation be implemented to compel them to make some of these improvements.
Thank you, Danielle. Everyone hopefully has seen the letter. Any comments, concerns, or questions about the letter that has been drafted to the next Government Oversight Committee? Looking in the room, looking online. Oh, yes, Representative Mastracchio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to confirm with Representative Millett that it's fine, because I think it really conveys exactly what we would, if we were sitting in the room with them and we were commenting to the public, that it would be what we wanted to say. So I just wanted to make sure that you're okay with it.
Thank you, and to both chairs. I think it does capture the concerns I expressed at the November 9th meeting. I just want to make sure that the next committee has that background, and I think it's well written, and I think the bullet points are the key pieces, and I'm comfortable with it.
Thank you, Representative.
Could I
Any
just
other-
ask,
Yes.
oh, sorry, could I just ask if Representative Millett noticed that I quoted him?
I did see the trail of expectations.
Oh,
which
good.
I didn't realize I was that poetic.
You are. I had to capture that. I thought it was ideal.
That was a good way to summarize it. Thank you. Any other comments, concerns, or questions about the letter? Okay. All right. Perfect. Oh, Danielle.
Representative O'Neill, I think, has a question.
Oh, Representative O'Neill.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Now I'm still working to pull this letter up. 'Cause I don't-
I can share my screen again if that's helpful, Representative O'Neill.
That would be great, thanks. I wanted to see if you all thought this would fit in, but something that I was thinking when we were going over these changes and whether the legislature would take action to require any of them is that when I make any kind of investment, I want to know, I want to be able to compare products and know what I'm looking at. So without making some kind of political statement, I did think it would be helpful to make a note that that issues such as billing supervision and other problems could be partly resolved via some kind of public defender's office in lieu of supervising attorneys. And I wondered if there was a way to work in the fact that we want to, in the future, consider that as we look at costs of what we're asking for here. No commitment, but just to flag it.
Yeah, no, I definitely appreciate this, the statement, Representative O'Neill, and Danielle, feel free to jump in. I think that seems a little bit more of a political policy adjustment that is not necessarily in line with the report. And I think the report, and again, others can correct me if I'm wrong, but really this is about outlining the details of the report. And then the next Government Oversight Committee, and quite frankly, the next committee of jurisdiction in the Judiciary Committee, are going to really have to weigh the recommendations of the report, the details and data analysis provided in the report to assess, do you overhaul the existing system or move to potentially a new option? That policy decision is not necessarily what we're outlining or what we're discussing today. It's simply to outline the details of the report to basically the next committee that will have to have those discussions. Danielle, did I phrase that okay?
Yes, that was my understanding when you asked me to direct the letter. The guidance I was given was to point out what is in the report. And as you know, we don't make any recommendation with regard to a public defender's office. I don't even know that we really refer to it, except for the fact that a subcommittee exists among the current cohort of the commission that is considering that. I will just remind you that there is yet to be a public comment period on this, and then there will be more formal recommendations by the next GOC committee. So there are still steps before a report of the GOC committee on this evaluation is sent to the full legislature.
Okay, so I'm hearing that we'll have a chance to have this conversation more. I wasn't seeing it as a recommendation, but an acknowledgement of a conversation that's on the table.
I definitely think, Representative, that the public comment period on the report will most likely start to bubble to the surface, not just details outlined and recommendations in the report, but I think, as you suggested, there might be some folks that come forward that point out that there might be some benefits or some downsides to multiple different systems. And so I think the public comment period might do that, but we are not necessarily Representative Mastracchio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Representative O'Neill, this is really the 129th GOC's comments for the public comment period. I guess that's how I look at it, because we're not going to be there and there will be a new GOC. So I see this letter as part of the public comment statement that will be in the record for the 130th GOC committee to use and pass on to whoever they pass it on to. So if you look at it like that, it probably isn't appropriate to add what you would like to add, but it may be, if you're part of the GOC or you're going to still be in the legislature, you'd be able to attend and make that as part of your public comment as well.
Fair enough. Yeah, no, I don't even think I'm asking for a policy recommendation, but just an acknowledgement of the options on the table and that we're providing information about background info that's going to go into that. But I can see what you're saying, so I'm happy to step back on that request.
Any other comments, concerns, or questions about the letter? Okay, so that is all set. So now we're going to go back to our regularly scheduled business. We have a presentation of the OPEGA report regarding pine tree development zones. This is a limited scope review. Everyone should have that in their packets, and folks can get it also online. So Danielle.
Sure, I'm just trying to. Can you see are you seeing the slides from the
I see it, but it's still the back end versus like the full.
Yeah,
Yeah.
sorry, it's not coming up on my, just gonna stop share for just a second, and for some reason that's not coming up. I think maybe I have to minimize YouTube. Sorry about this. I think I'm getting it now. Hold on just a second. Does that look better?
That's perfect, Danielle.
Okay. I'm not finding my screen that navigates between. There we go. Got it. Okay. Sorry about that. I had that smoother the last time. Okay. So thank you. And yes, this is a limited scope review of the Pine Tree Development Zone program. And I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what that means in terms of a limited scope review. The Pine Tree Development Zone program evaluation that the GOC tasked OPEGA to do, which was presented in 2017, was a tax expenditure evaluation report. So that was a full evaluation of the program, and it came out of that schedule and categorization that this GOC committee does every year in consultation with the taxation committee, which puts different tax expenditures in different categories and then rank or orders them in terms of when they will be reviewed. This is not a full evaluation. This was something that was done apart from that categorization and schedule, but it was a bit, I guess, for lack of a better term, a follow-up on the 2017 OPEGA evaluation. But I just want to be clear that this is not an evaluation of the program and its results or how things maybe are going in terms of business participation or the distribution of benefits. It's really limited to 3 questions that the GOC tasked us to look at as a bit of a follow-up to the 2017 report. So again, to speak a little bit more about how we got here and some background, there was this report in 2017 that was presented to the GOC. And at the time of the report, there existed a sunset provision in the Pine Tree Development Zone program. And it would have limited new entries into the program in the end of 2018. So the program benefits would continue for those already in the program, but new entries in the program would have ended at the end of 2018. And what the legislature did in the at the end of that session in 2018 was to extend that sunset. So they enacted LD 1654, which extended that for another 3 years. So there is still a sunset provision in the Pine Tree Zone program that would limit new entries into the program. And now that has been moved to the end of 2021, so December of 2021. What our report found at the time was that the goals of the program were not necessarily well linked with its design. So given that there was this sunset pending and that we had pointed out that there were some issues with the in the evaluation that were pointed out that actually resulted in changes, you asked for us to get some sort of update of what things look like now. So not again as the program as a whole, but how have those changes been made and what do those changes mean for the program moving forward? So the scope of this limited scope review is to inform you about the changes that have been made to the program since the OPEGA evaluation in 2017, how effectively the current design of the program, because there have been changes, so how effectively that design meets the newly stated objectives. So not only have there been changes to the design, the statute now includes this is what we want this program to do. We have stated the goals and objectives, which didn't exist in that sort of form prior to the 2017 report. And then finally, given that you were aware of the revealing or the work on a statewide long-term strategic plan. You wanted to see how well the program aligns with the plan as you hoped it would be available, and it is, and we'll speak to that in this evaluation as well. So again, just to give you a brief overview of what this presentation will cover, we're going to give you a brief overview of the Pine Tree Development Zone program. It'd be good to have a refresher on exactly what it is, who administers it, what the benefits are, but again, not a full evaluation. And then we'll cover those scope questions that I just told you about. And then at the end, we'll provide you with a summary of our conclusions. So let's first talk about the Pine Tree Development Zone program, and we'll cover just a brief overview for now. But for those of you who are interested in the details, you can look to the 2017 report, and you can also refer to Pine Tree Zone statute. But first, let's talk about what a business must do to be eligible as a participant in the Pine Tree Development Zone program. So a business can only qualify for the program if it is a for-profit entity and operates in one of the program's targeted sectors, which you should see listed on this slide. Another requirement for eligibility is the requirement to hire at least one new qualifying employee. And to count as a qualifying employee to give you entry into the program, that employee must be added above the business's employment baseline. So it must really be a net new employee representing an increase in the business's total employment. It could not be, for example, a shift from one location of the business to another and saying, oh, this place that we're using to qualify for Pine Tree Zone has a new employee, but it wasn't really in addition to the baseline. So that wouldn't count. It has to be an actual net new employee, and the statute is fairly clear on what that means. In order to be a qualifying employee, that person must also be employed full-time in a qualifying business activity in Maine. They must be provided access to a retirement plan and group health insurance, and the income has to meet certain program requirements, which is essentially that it exceeds the average wage in that county. For more detail on that, you can certainly look to the statute or the prior report. Additionally, businesses must also meet what's known as the but-for requirement. That might be becoming a familiar term to those of you who have heard a few of our presentations on tax expenditure reviews. And this requirement directs the business to certify, not go forward with the expansion or locating their business somewhere if it were not for the program benefits. So if we didn't have these Pine Tree Zone program benefits, we wouldn't be doing this thing. So they are directly linked, and businesses are required to make that statement for entry into the program. There were changes to this but-for requirement because we noted that in our 2017 report, we noted that it's not necessarily a very effective control to ensure that the benefits are definitely linked to the business expansion that the business is cited when applying for the program. And the change to the but-for requirement was that the statement or the affidavit saying that, yes, we're doing it because of these benefits, it added a notarization requirement to that but-for statement. Okay, so now let's talk about the benefits that are offered by the program. The program offers eligible businesses access to 10 different benefits. You can also see a list of these 10 benefits on page 3 of your report for those of you following along. And there's also more detail about each one of these benefits in the appendix of the report, Appendix A, which you can find on page 21. The benefits that are most widely used under the program include the income tax credits, the sales tax exemptions or reimbursements, and then the enhancement to the ETIF payments that come along with this program. And many of you may remember that OPEGA published an evaluation of the ETIF program at the beginning of the 129th legislature in January of 2019. ETIF is actually a separate program, but the benefits available through ETIF can be enhanced or increased, and sometimes to a very substantial degree, for a business that is certified in both programs. And we do talk about the relationship between the these programs in our 2017 report. I won't get into that detail now. So in terms of administration of the program, it's interesting to note that the varied benefits that were on that last slide in the program are administered by various agencies. So multiple agencies are involved in administering the sort of menu of benefits that are available under the program. However, DECD alone is responsible for certifying the applicants. So they are the gatekeeper or the gateway into the program. They are the ones that review the applications and certify a business as eligible to receive these benefits that are ultimately administered by multiple agencies. So Maine Revenue Services administers most of one of the primary benefits, which is the sales and income tax credits. The other primary benefit, which is ETIF, is jointly administered by MRS and DECD. And DECD is solely responsible for the administration of one of the smaller benefits, which is the exclusion from TIF limitations. Again, we don't need to get into the detail of these different benefits. And while the others are administered by Maine's utility companies, so the PUC or Efficiency Maine Trust. So you can see there's a lot of administration or different administrators in order for a business to receive these benefits. Our 2017 evaluation reported that this fragmented responsibility created a challenge for management of the program as a whole. So this sort of combination of benefits is supposed to have one, essential goal, which we're going to speak to that newly stated goal in a minute, but there isn't one agency that oversees whether those things are happening. They're each individually administering the benefits that they're responsible for. And we found that there's no single entity with statutory authority to oversee. So statute doesn't even recognize that there is one entity that should be overseeing and coordinating all of these benefits that are distributed to businesses. Nor is there one entity with access to usage data for all of the program's benefits, which I think is an interesting point to raise. So whether or not the utility benefits, for example, are really critical to the success of the program, that may not be easy to ascertain because there is not one entity who is looking at the usage of all the benefits and maybe comparing them, seeing which ones are the most impactful, or whatever the measure is that one overarching administrator would look at to see, is this program being successful? There is no provision for one person or one entity to have access to all of that data. This remains the case today, and it contributes to oversight challenges for the legislature, which we will talk a bit more in detail about in this presentation. So one of the questions that you directed us to answer when you told us to do this limited scope review is, has the program changed since OPEGA's 2017 report? And the answer to that question is yes. The 128th legislature in particular made a number of changes to the program, and they are listed here on this slide. If you look at page 5 of your report, it will give a little bit more detail to each one of these changes. And again, those changes were, they clarified the goals of the program for the purposes of evaluating the success of the program. They established new certification requirements to ensure that no sales tax benefits can be received until after at least one net new qualifying job has been created. So prior to the 2017 report, businesses were able to get the benefits with the promise of creating that job, even though they couldn't demonstrate that that job had been created yet. That has changed. So there are no benefits available to a business until they can demonstrate that they've created at least one new net job as a participant in the program. The law was also changed to require that new data be gathered from Pine Tree participants annually. As I noted before, the legislature in the 128th amended the but-for requirement, and that was adding that notarization component. And it also increased reporting to the legislature. So it added that there should be more reporting to the legislature. The 129th did make some changes that are less substantive and aren't really relevant to this report, although they are included in the report. So you can see the list of the changes made by the 129th, but they don't necessarily speak to what I'm going to talk to you about today. So another question that you asked us to answer in this limited scope review is how well the design of the program, including the recent changes, aligns with the program's newly established goals. And those newly established goals are expressed in statute to inform future evaluation of the program, and they are stated here on this slide. So I'm quoting from a section of statute, Title 30A, Section 5250-P, and it states that for the purposes of evaluation, the specific public policy objective of the Pine Tree Development Zone program established by the subchapter is to create and retain quality jobs in this state by reducing the tax burden experienced by businesses and thereby making this state's business tax burden more comparable to other states, encouraging location and expansion of businesses in the state, and improving the competitiveness of this state's businesses. So before I get into that in depth, I wanted to read those to you. So the other changes were also that the legislature clarified that the ultimate goal of the program is to create and retain quality jobs, as you can see in that above statement. And then in terms of how the program aligns with the newly established goals, the design changes ensured that benefits are provided primarily to businesses that create and retain jobs. I mentioned that a bit before, where the past iteration of the program allowed benefits to be distributed before that job was created. New design elements require that job to be created, and existing ones ensure that those jobs are of high quality, have benefits, are full-time, and are associated with a wage requirement or a salary requirement. So again, one of the most significant changes that has happened since our 2017 report has been the introduction of these evaluation goals into statute that you just saw on the last slide. And this new statutory language suggests a logic chain, essentially a diagram showing how the program is expected to work. So looking at the program's goals in this form in a logic chain, which is displayed for you graphically here, it shows the cause and effect that policymakers, when they made this statement of the goals, hope will flow from the provision of the benefits that are provided under the program. So it starts with the provision of benefits, which is tax and other cost reductions, which are expected to support certain business conditions. These business conditions are shown here as intermediary goals. And they are reduced business taxes for businesses, which are hoped to then make the state's tax burden more comparable to other states, which would then encourage location and expansion of businesses in the state and improve the state's businesses' competitiveness. However, these intermediary goals, like making the state's tax burden more comparable to other states, are not the final goals the program is targeting based on this logic chain. Instead, they are more like midway points as the program aims to move its way to the final goal, which is, according to the statutory statement, the creation and retention of quality jobs. So as shown in the new statutory language and illustrated in this logic chain, the Pine Tree Development Zone program's ultimate goal is the creation of quality jobs. Consequently, the effectiveness of the program hinges on whether program participants actually create and retain quality jobs in Maine. So considering the stated goal or objective of the program is to create and retain quality jobs, the change made after OPEGA's 2017 report requiring that a Pine Tree Development Zone business must create at least one job before receiving program benefits, that does align with the goal of the program. So that change, which affected the design of the program does align with the newly stated goals. There were also, as I've noted, existing elements that ensure the creation and retention of high quality jobs. So these were things that were in the program to begin with prior to the 2017 report. But when you look at them as a whole and you compare them to the newly stated goals of the program, it shows us that there are elements of the design that align with the newly stated goals of the program. The existing elements of the design of the program that do align are the clearly defined quality standards that qualifying jobs must meet. Again, I've listed those a couple times for you now. The fact that there are measures to ensure that the qualifying jobs are actually net new, not shifted, and that some benefits are based on the increase in qualifying employment, unlike the sales tax and benefits that are provided when the one job hurdle is cleared. So ETIF is, the benefit is greater the more jobs that you create, whereas the sales tax and benefits, they basically stay the same even if you've only created one job. So these design elements, existing and new, do show us that the newly aligned, the design of the program does align with the newly stated goals. Despite recent amendments, however, the program's but-for requirement still provides no assurance that the Pine Tree Development Zone is impacting business behavior. So this is an element where maybe there is not strong alignment of the program with the stated goals and objectives. Our report notes that those interested in ensuring that a program is effective should focus on strong oversight, which would be supported by proactive management by the administrators. Prior reviews of the program and continuing calls for evaluation of the Pine Tree Development Zone program suggest to us that there is dissatisfaction with the available information about the program, which we think proactive management would allow for. And ultimately, policymakers want to know whether the resources spent on the program's benefits are having the impact that they intended. And Pine Tree Zone's but-for requirement recognizes, so the existing but-for requirement that we say is not particularly effective, it does recognize that the program is only an effective use of resources if it is generating more job creation than would have happened without the program. However, the but-for requirement, despite the amendments, continues to provide no assurance that the Pine Tree Development Zone is impacting business behavior as intended. So what would strong oversight supported by proactive management look like that would help legislators, when they are conducting oversight, ensure that the resources are having the intended outcome? And it could look like this. So assessing the degree to which the program's elements support the design and how plausible it is that the design will achieve the program's goals. That could be an ongoing conversation between program managers, administrators, as well as the legislature or the Committee of Oversight. So that sort of ongoing assessment, okay, here's what we want the program to do. Here's what we put in place to do those things. Are they linked? Is it a reasonable expectation that they will result in the things we want them to result in? So sort of ongoing discussion about that, keeping that fluid and repetitive. It involves asking questions about the logic chain at the program's core. For example, are the identified or presumed barriers to the expansion of business or the creation of jobs in Maine, the ones that we've identified in the program, are they the right barriers to target? So are we getting at the right problem to sort of open the gateway to allow for business expansion and new jobs? Have we identified the right barriers that need to be overcome to accomplish that? Another question that you would ask in terms of doing this ongoing sort of design assessment is, are the cause and effect relationships in the logic chain reasonable? Do those make sense? That if we do this thing, this will be the result. If you are not really sure, do those assumptions, are they supported by research? So keeping an eye on those sorts of things will help with a strengthened oversight. In doing this assessment work, legislators can get a sense of how confident they are in the idea that by achieving the program's intermediary goals, the program will perform as intended or meet its ultimate goal. It's critical also to have ready access to program information, which provides necessary perspective on how the program is actually functioning in the real world. This requires what we call proactive program management. So this is beyond administration and compliance, but includes support of oversight by focusing on outcomes. So the program managers or the administrators would be focusing on outcomes rather than just administration and compliance. And working with policymakers to do this, you would be seeking to get clarity on the goals of the program if those are unclear. And I think you've seen in past evaluations, the goals of a program are not always really clearly expressed in statute. So if those are unclear, it would be proactive. It would be a proactive management practice to get clarity on those goals and also to set benchmarks for measuring performance. What does an increase in job look like? What does an expansion in this activity look like? How would we measure that? So a proactive manager would be clear on what that measurement would look like and what the legislature is looking for. Proactive managers would be initiating or advocating for the collection of the right data to answer the questions. If they're seeing that this isn't the right data to answer the question, rather than just providing you a report on data, they would be saying, we think we should be gathering this to answer the question of whether the program is doing well. Proactive management would include proposing changes when economic conditions shift, or if they get a particular response to participant feedback, or when there are advances in research that show this particular incentive incentivizes this particular behavior, which would align well with our program. Proactive management would also include providing timely and current information to support oversight and decision-making about the allocation of state resources. So often the but-for requirement is sometimes seen as a substitute for this. If we say to the business, you have to tell us that you would not be doing this thing unless we gave you these benefits. You know, research has shown and our evaluations have shown that that's not really effective, that it's a fairly easy thing to comply with, but doesn't necessarily inform you whether or not providing these benefits is having the result that you had intended. But this sort of combination of asking questions at the core of the program's purpose and being supported in that oversight function with strong proactive management, we think would be a better way of understanding the whether the program is doing well rather than the but-for. So the third question that you asked us to look at was how well the program with its newly stated goals and objectives and the amendments to its design align with Maine's statewide strategic plan. So as you now know, Maine has a statewide strategic plan for economic development that was released this year. And this is something actually that's worth noting that the GOC has been working towards since 2006, when OPEGA released its first report on economic development programs in Maine. And now that it's here, OPEGA, as well as the legislature, can use it as a tool or another lens through which we can evaluate economic development programs like the Pine Tree Development Zone. But first, I did want to just give you a brief overview of the statewide strategic plan. And this plan includes 3 high-level 10-year goals. One is growing the average wage by 10% to the benefit of workers at all income levels in the state. Increasing the value of what Maine sells per worker by 10%, and attracting 75,000 people to Maine's workforce from within and outside the state. So those are the real high-level goals that are stated in the strategic plan. It also drills down to 7 specific strategy areas for Maine to focus on for economic growth and includes specific actions to support each of those statutory areas. And you can see those in the lower box. So as part of this review, OPEGA looked at how the Pine Tree Development Zone fits within this statewide strategic plan. And we found that the program does align broadly with all 3 of the plan's overarching 10-year goals. So those 3 sort of at the top. but it does not speak to the specific actions that are identified in the strategic plan. For example, the plan's 10-year goal of attracting 75,000 people to Maine's workforce. You can see how this might align with Pine Tree's goal of job creation. However, drilling down into the details, the plan describes a number of specific actions to support this growth in Maine's workforce, things like expanding and simplifying debt relief programs like the Educational Opportunity Tax Credit, or improving the quality of early childhood education. So those are some of the more specific strategies in the plan. And the Pine Tree Development Zone program does not speak to those specific actions. We spoke to DECD about this and heard from them that this may be by design. And I'll explain what we heard. What they described to us was that the statewide strategic planning effort was focused on adding to Maine's toolbox rather than replacing existing tools like the Pine Tree Development Zone program. So it's almost as if the plan was built to lay upon or lay on top of everything that was already in place for economic development in Maine. In addition, the plan was built to support economic growth, which was a strategy that made sense at the time when this plan was under development. However, since then, Maine, along with the rest of the country and the world, has faced economic challenges due to the COVID-19 pandemic. And DECD noted that the Pine Tree Development Zone's fit within the state's plan may have been viewed differently pre-pandemic. What this role is may be more clear when the Economic Recovery Committee releases its second report, which is, I believe, scheduled for release next month. So I'm just going to pull all those because I'll forget to pull one up. So in summary, we have covered a lot, but I did want to provide for you sort of a summary of the conclusions that we reached in this report. And since 2017, the legislature has made significant changes to the Pine Tree Development Zone program, including clarification of the program's goals. The Pine Tree Development Zone's clarified goals focus on creation and retention of quality jobs as the program's ultimate goal. The amended design of the program ensures that benefits will mostly be provided only to businesses that create and retain at least one quality job, and requires notarization of but-for statements filed by applicants. But again, these amendments do not guarantee that the Pine Tree Development Zone is actually resulting in more quality job creation and retention that would have happened without the program. And the way to assess whether or not that actually is happening would be through proactive management, which would support, strengthen oversight to ensure that the Pine Tree Development Zone program is affected or meeting the goals as the legislature intended. And finally, while generally in line with the overarching goals of Maine's statewide strategic plan, the Pine Tree Development Zone does not speak to the specific actions outlined in the plan. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Danielle. Does anybody have any questions, comments, or concerns for Danielle regarding the report before we also include our guests that are also on the Zoom call? Any questions in particular for Danielle to answer? Looking around room, I'm looking online. Oh, Danielle.
Yeah, I've neglected to mention at the beginning of this report, the team from OPEGA that worked on this report. And usually I do that at the beginning, but I do want to express thanks to Senior Analyst with OPEGA, Jen Henderson, and Analyst Carrie Hojera for their work on this report. And I believe one of them may be online, so they would hear you if you say thank you and good job.
Absolutely. No, we very much appreciate the work pulling this together. It's not an easy feat, so we really appreciate all the hard work from the OPEGA office. Any other comments, concerns, or questions from the committee for Danielle? And keep in mind, there will be a public comment and work session period for the 130th regarding this report, but we felt it was really important to make sure that this got released publicly so that not only the public and interested parties can review it, but also the next group of legislators have an opportunity before cloture to be looking and using this information. So we also have representatives from DECD and MRS on the Zoom call. I'll bring them in if there are questions for them. Do we have any questions from the committee for either MRS or DECD regarding the report? Oh, yes, Representative Millet.
I'm not sure who to direct the question to, Mr. Chair, whether it be DECD primarily or supplementing main revenue services, but it's interesting to think that this committee, Government Oversight, really stressed the need for a plan that we could call economic development and strategic way back in 2006. And we have that in its broader terms that was delivered by DECD last year. And now we have post-pandemic a report on economic recovery coming. And this oversight review of the Pine Tree development zones as a small part of fitting in with both of those other two activities. But I think probably DECD is going to play a bigger role in sharpening up the strategic plan with timelines, focusing on what comes out of the Economic Recovery Committee, and maybe addressing the two pieces that I think are the weaker ones in the summary part of this report, namely the lack of a strong but-for provision and the need for proactive program management and strengthened oversight in PTGZ. So I guess I'm looking at the next legislature, and hopefully the Government Oversight Committee will not lose interest in the issue, which has been a part of its focus for 14 years. But maybe DECD could comment a little bit about how they see the December report of the economic recovery, which is going to command a lot of our attention in the 130th as we try to revive the weakened sectors, particularly at the small business level, and also try to sharpen what we can do and what we should do with respect to fleshing out the 10-year plan in the upcoming months. So I'll be looking for comments from DECD and to maybe a lesser extent MRS and how they can address the conclusions, particularly the weaker portions that I referred to.
We have Kate Foy from DECD. Kate?
Hi, thank you. Thanks, Representative Millet, for the question. I think short of, at this point, offering any policy recommendations, what I would say is the strategic plan was designed to ebb and flow with changes in the economy. And so although we didn't anticipate a year ago that this is the position that we would be in, certainly as we take a look at the recommendations that come out of the ERC and align them with the work that we want to do in the strategic plan, we'll be looking at sort of all of the programs and all of the recommendations. So I'm not sure if I'm answering your question, except to say that yes, we'll be looking at how the strategic plan lines up with the ERC recommendations and the adjustments that we need to make to move towards a recovery.
Okay. Representative?
Thank you, Kate. And you did respond to my basic underlying concern, and in that you do see the importance of the 130th addressing the issues that are evolving as we look to hopefully the end of the pandemic and recovery in the context of making the plan more specific, short and long term. And that offers an opportunity for all of us, I think, to look at PTGZ as to how it fits better and how it can be made better. So you did respond to my question, and I think what I was hoping for is that there is a broad acknowledgement that this will be an important agenda issue for the 130th.
I think the 130th and all of the administration has a really important role moving forward as we look towards recovery. I also just wanted to take 1 second to introduce Phoenix McLaughlin from DECD as well. He's taking over the tax incentives director position. We've made some shifts. So I just wanted to make sure legislators who may know, it used to be Andrea Smith, and Phoenix has stepped into that role in our department. So.
Perfect. Thank you, Kate, and welcome, Phoenix. I think we have a question from Representative Peirce.
Thank you. It's actually for DECD and the long range, the 10-year plan. It was an interesting note that instead of you designed the plan as an overlay to what we had as existing programs. And when I think about designing something for 10 years, I would have thought you would design the plan that you think is best, and then we might be looking at all of the things that we have going on and whether or not they respond to that. So this program responds to it generally, but not specifically. So can you just speak a little bit to that decision and how all of our, this program in particular, because that's the only one we're talking about. That's an interesting, to me, that's an interesting direction that you took.
Sure. Thank you for the question. I'm not necessarily sure we designed the plan as an overlay to the programs that we already had, so to speak, but we didn't need to reinvent the wheel on some of these tax incentive programs and include them in the plan as they already exist. The plan was looking towards recommendations for new things that we could do as we move forward over the next 10 years. One of the things that DECD had planned to do sort of everything is pre-COVID, post-COVID, was to do a major look at all of the tax incentive programs with an audit from someone outside of the department to see what works, what's not working, what can we improve, do we need to design something new? Unfortunately, the funding for that has been put on hold, obviously, in a post-COVID world, with the intention to still do that. Moving forward, we're just trying to figure out from a budgetary standpoint how we can appropriately make that work in the most responsible way possible. So I guess I think to answer your question, I'm not sure if I have, is that we understand we have these tax incentive programs. They're important incentive to attract new investment in the state. Before we make any policy recommendations about any of those things, I think it's important to look at them. And then to see sort of some of these other recommendations that are coming out now that we're post-COVID, well, not post, we're all really in it, but sort of where we were before versus where we are now, and looking at some recommendations from the Economic Recovery Committee as well, and how they can align with the strategic plan and some of these other tax incentive programs that we also plan to take a look at.
Thank you. I think that somewhat answers it. It's a work in progress. It's a work in progress, right?
Yeah, that sort of got a pause button pushed, as many things did, in March of last year.
Thanks.
And Phoenix, I don't know if you have anything to add to that answer.
No, thanks. I think that you pretty much covered it. Yeah, it's a work in progress, I think, as the representative said.
Okay. Representative Mastracchio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And Kate, you know how I feel about the economic development plan, and I really think that Representative Peirce is kind of echoing the way that I felt, which was everything was supposed to be on the table. And so I was a little bit, surprised to hear that it was just layered on top of what we already had, because I envisioned it a little differently. And I think I understand why we are where we are, but I hope going forward that we do look at everything like it's the first time we're looking at it, because it's a new world, and something that's worked for 10, 15 years doesn't necessarily, we found that out. The old way of doing things is not always going to work in the midst of a pandemic. So let's take what we've learned and figure out, we now have new businesses that have kind of come out of the pandemic. I think that everything deserves to be on the table. And I hope that, and I understand the need for independent reviews in DECD, but we did this statute of tax incentive evaluations for a reason. And I think they need to be utilized. And we know very definitely that the 130th will be addressing pine tree zones because it's expiring. It is going to be a discussion. And I think that DECD needs to be prepared to be very specific in how they think that this plan fits in to an economic development strategy and recovery going forward. And were I sitting in the legislature, that's the questions that I would be asking.
That's a good point, Representative. Any other comments, comments, questions, or concerns for DECD or MRS? While we have them on Zoom, and I'm just looking at the list here. Anybody in the room? And also any other questions for Danielle regarding the limited scope review report? Just want to make sure I don't forget everybody. I'm just looking through the list. Okay. Well, with that, I want to thank DECD and MRS for everybody for showing up and being available for our questions. Really appreciate it. I'm sure this will be a big topic for discussion for the 130th, as we've all indicated. And again, for the public's notice, we are going to, the 130th will be responsible for handling a public comment period and an additional work session on this report. So there'll be an opportunity for interested parties to come forward and provide that feedback. And so we would expect probably sometime in January-ish, Danielle, for that public comment period to probably take place. Okay. Thank you. To
Great.
everybody.
Thank you so much for having us. And for those of you who won't be back in the 130th, it's been a pleasure working with you. And I wish we could say goodbye in a different way, but thank you so much for all that you've done, and look forward to working with some of you in different capacities as you move on to your next chapter.
Thanks so much, Kate, and welcome, Phoenix.
Thank you very much.
Okay, and so with that, we'll put that report off to the side. I'm sure that'll be a handy tidbit of information going forward. So now we're going on to a report from our director. We have some good news, and so we like good news on the Government Oversight Committee, and it's a reflection of the hard work of the entire staff at OPEGA. So Danielle, did you want to tee that up?
Yeah, so included in your packet was, it wasn't really a letter we received, it was addressed to the chairs and the GOC committee, but it came by way of us, so it is in your packets, and it's from the Pew Charitable Trust, and it's from their state fiscal health division, and it's just talking about the value of tax expenditure reports generally, and how they have appreciated our approach to some of these evaluations and the usefulness of them. We have been asked at past meetings, virtual meetings of this division of the Pew Charitable Trust to talk about some of our evaluations. In particular, the last one was the Better and Betty evaluation. So, you know, I guess maybe it is a little bit patting us on the back, sort of talking about this now, but we did want you to see this as it was addressed to you, and you know, credit is due to the analysts within OPEGA that, you know, this isn't a very new type of program that we do these tax expenditure reviews. It's something that we haven't been doing very long, and it's developing in other states as well. So more and more states across the country are adding this to their evaluation offices or creating offices just for this purpose. And as those offices are coming up, Pew has noted us as a resource and an example of good tax expenditure evaluations. So,
well, this is a good affirmation of the work that your office is doing, Danielle. So I think this is really great to have that reflected in sort of a third-party atmosphere. I think that's really great to have that recognition. The other thing is the status of the reports, status of the projects in process.
Yeah, I just realized that may not be of that much interest to this committee since you're leaving. So I'm happy to sort of skip over that in terms of where the program evaluations are. I think you've laid out what the new GOC in the 130th will be looking at sort of immediately as it starts, and then we will give them updates on where reports that are in progress or haven't been yet presented will be. So we can save some of that detail for the 130th, if that's okay with you. I did have one bit of information with regard to the director's update that I did want to share, which is that this will be my last GOC meeting as the director of OPEGA. I have been selected to serve as the director of OPLA and to replace Marion Highland Barr, who is leaving legislative service. So I will be serving starting in the 130th in that capacity as director of OPLA.
We're going to do a great job over there, though. I'm sure the Government Oversight Committee will absolutely, and the staff at OPEGA will absolutely miss you. You're not going far, which is a good thing.
That's right. That's right.
Well, thank you for providing that notice. And I'll just have to say, as we start to wrap up this meeting, this is obviously my last time chairing this committee, let alone my last time serving in the legislature. So, and I know Representative Mastracchio as well. So I just wanted to say to all the committee members and to the staff at OPEGA, it's really been an honor to serve alongside each and every one of you, both in person and virtually now. We've, I think, done a really good job over the last 2 years of kind of carrying the torch of holding department heads and agencies accountable, making sure that taxpayer dollars are spent appropriately, all while promoting good governance in a bipartisan way. So hopefully that will continue in the 130th, which I know it will. That's an important tradition of this committee. And I really also appreciate Edith Connors, who's our wonderful clerk. I mean, she just does so much. She makes us look good in our committee. So really appreciate that, and the collaborative spirit of Director Fox and the staff at OPEGA. They really have done a masterful job. Representative Mastracchio?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. It's really been a pleasure for me to serve on this committee. This is my 6th year on this committee and my 4th as House Chair. And I've enjoyed this. The work that we do here is really important. And I feel like we're leaving it in a good place considering what we've gone through. And I want to thank Danielle and the staff at OPEGA for doing all the work that they had to do to get us to this point, because their work never stopped. And I really appreciate that. So we're leaving it in your hands, whoever. I'm hoping there's some people that are sitting here or virtually or otherwise that will be on this committee, because I do think that there's some continuity is important. So I want to thank everybody for all the work that they've done. There's a lot of work on this committee. And I think it's important, if you're in any position to, if anyone that you know is contemplating being on this committee, that they understand that it's not one that you can just come in and phone it in. And really thank you, Danielle, and good luck.
Thank you.
I know that you will make sure the transition is smooth. So thank you.
Any other final comments, concerns, or questions from committee members before we adjourn for our last time in the 129th legislature? Okay, and with that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everybody. Have a safe Thanksgiving.